Okay, we'll get started. Hari Om to everyone. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Mavid Vishavahaihi. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandathami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamayah Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Rutaduhe Namaha Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Stunvanti Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapadakramopanisadaihi Kayantiyam Samagaha Dhyanavastita Datkatena Manasa Pashyantiyam Yoginaha Yasyantam Navidusura Suraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So we have just started with the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. In the 6th chapter, like we discussed last time also, the way Krishna leaves Arjuna is by telling him that of all the bhaktas, the one which is his most favorite, or the one who he thinks is the highest, is the one who has actually completely merged with him. When he means him, he actually refers to himself as that highest state of consciousness. And so he says, only one who has actually worked very hard to actually discover his identity with that highest, only that person is really a yogi, somebody who has actually worked so hard. So then the question would arise, what about the rest of all of us? What is really the state? And here, I have to say Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda, he brings this aspect of, who is the one who is, is really seeking somebody and who is the one who is searching. So, he talks about how the rest of them, the rest of them, that is the people, who in the 6th chapter, he mentioned about, the person who does a lot of tapas, the person who does a tremendous amount of reading, the person who does tremendous amount of work, all that. Those kind of people are only still searching. Whereas the person who is really merged with that highest, that person is the one who is really seeking. And this beautiful example that Swami Chinmayananda gives, in that regard, is like, when we go to sleep in the night, when we are trying to go to sleep in the night, there are many of us, who are really trying very hard to go to sleep. We try different kind of things, but we have not yet slept. But the one who is, who has then finally decides that, I'm not going to try anymore. I'm just going to merge into the sleep. It is that person who finally gets to go to sleep, you know. So it is that difference, that person who has totally merged into that sleep, the one who has gone to sleep is the one who is really sleeping, right? So to the person who is really giving up completely everything and just totally sort of surrenders himself, such a person is the one who's really gone, who's merged with that absolute infinite. So that is how in the sixth chapter, we left the whole, that chapter, and we are moving into literally a completely, even though I say it is a completely new area, what I mean to say is now we are sort of giving up our individual identity. And now we are trying to see how we are actually part of the bigger self. And that is why I'm bringing this picture up. I know I brought it up already 3 times, and today is the 4th time I'm bringing it up. But I still think this is the important thing, because we get so caught up in ourselves that we don't realize that we are actually part of the bigger picture. So this is like the evolution for us, like again, going back to the sleep example, when I keep thinking that, I want to go to sleep, and this I is still there, one will never really go to sleep because I'm still so caught up in this I-ness of mine. And especially in the night time, when I'm so identified with this I, then I immediately think about all the things that happened that day for me, where I was affected. The minute I give up that I-ness and I say, I'm just going to now think about the bigger picture, it's so amazing that even in this simple example of a sleep, I feel that I can sleep much better because now I'm not thinking about myself anymore. So too, this example is just to show that, when I think that I'm part of a bigger picture, then all the other issues that typically will trouble me will not trouble me, because then I realize that in this big picture, there are so many things happening at the same time. And all these things have to work together to give me a certain result, But if I think that this is exactly how I want it to be done, it can never happen. So this connection with this bigger thing, bigger picture is so much more essential in our lives. And that is the transition that Lord Krishna is slowly trying to bring Arjuna, where he's trying to take Arjuna out of himself and create that aspect of connection with the bigger picture. And that is why I am bringing this another picture here, which is like this bubble, simple bubble, and this huge ocean. Each one of us, if we think we are just this individual bubble, how are we going to ever, live our lives? We have to think that we are part of this huge ocean, and that each one of us, we influence this whole big ocean. And typically, if you look at physics, it will first tell you that this bubble in this big ocean influences the ocean in so many different ways, because there is so much of air compressed, in this water bubble. They along with everything in the physics part of it, whether it's the acoustics, whether it is the, it creates the sound of the wave, all because of that air in that bubble, right? Then they are responsible for transporting gases. There are so many things that small bubble can do in this big ocean. So to each one of us, we are responsible for so many things in the whole universe. We don't think about it, but we always think about what is in it for us, right? So that is the whole, again, idea of looking at ourselves as a connection to Jagat, and from Jagat to who that created is. We in this whole realm of thinking about only the created portion, and that is when I say the created, which is the Jagat, which is the world, we get again so caught up in this created that we forget who is the creator. And this is why, we always just think that, okay, there is some creator. If at all we come to even that point of thinking about the creator, we might think about, okay, this creator who is up there, why is he making me suffer so much? What has God to play a role in my life? How is that whole equation happening? So this part of it also, slowly you see in the 7th chapter, Lord Krishna is taking Arjuna from, like I said, the individual jiva to exposing us to the whole Jagat. What exactly is this Jagat? And finally, to the creator of the Jagat. Who is that creator? What is the relationship between jiva and this Ishvara? All this is what the 7th chapter brings about. It's really such a beautiful thing, and it really finally you come to understand this term from this Rig Veda, which is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. How am I really connected to this whole thing, this concept of one world, one family, all this one becomes a lot more, it becomes easy for us to understand this aspect. And so you see that Krishna, brings to Arjuna, he promises him, he tells him, I'm going to explain to you this entire science. And this entire science, he says, I will tell you not just the theory part of it, but I will actually strive, I'll somehow see how I can remove all the doubts in your mind about this whole world. And this is exactly why, Bhagavad Gita is such a fantastic text, because it gives you the whole science of living, the whole science of life. And you really see this relation. And when one realizes that, then you see that everything that I'm going through is only at a very, very superficial surface level. But I need to understand the whole depth, like this ocean that I just saw. I just showed you just now. So the first 3 verses in the 7th chapter, you see is how Krishna is, preparing Arjuna, because he knows Arjuna is very intelligent, he's very smart, and he will not just accept it just like that. So, and he knows that Arjuna is really asking this question, how can I, this bubble, who is, very finite, which has this wall of water and everything, how can I really be really part of this big ocean, which is what you're asking me? So with that, we saw the first verse last time, which was Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Maya Sakta Manaf Partha, Yogam Yunjanma Adashrayaha, Asamshayam Samagram Mam, Yatha Jnasisi Tatshunu. So he tries to explain to him, how just focus on me, come to me with your mind, which is asaktaha. Saktaha means attachment. Asaktaha, absolutely no attachment itself. Just try to bring that, so you see how the words are also such beautifully chosen here. We know that the mind is really this emotional, psychological equipment, right? So here he's trying to tell Arjuna, this mind, which is so emotional, so sometimes so disintegrated, it goes into so many different places. Try to bring that mind completely into one single devotion, completely, just make it single pointed into me. So Maya Asaktaha Manaha, this mind, Partha, again the word referring to Arjuna. And he says, Yogam Yunjanma Dashraya, continuously keep on practicing to bring this mind to me as your final goal. Ashraya, which we said last time, Ashraya means the support or the goal. So make it completely that goal of mine, make me as your goal. And I will tell you without absolutely any doubt whatever you want, no doubts at all. Because again, this is I get, I guess sometimes for all of us, we don't even have any doubts because we don't think about it. But here, Krishna knows that Arjuna started to think, and so he feels that he's now, Arjuna didn't even have to ask the question. Krishna already now understands what Arjuna is going through. Not that he did not understand before, he did, but now he's, even before Arjuna can ask him, he's already telling him about what that absolute reality is and everything he's going to explain. But like we discussed last time, this word shrunu, this art of listening, this Krishna being that absolutely perfect teacher, he anticipates the doubt and he wants to remove it, and he tries to explain this so well here. And here, when we think about what is this art of listening, last time I spent a little time to explain about Shravanam, right? Now, between Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam, which are the three sadhanas for when you are in this Jnana Marga, right? When you are in this path of knowledge, we first listen and then we try to kind of churn it in our own mind through this process of Mananam. And then finally, we do the art of Nididhyasanam, which is once through the process of churning, I remove absolutely any doubt about who I am. This is where this philosophy is taking us to. One can actually then in the state of Nididhyasanam be completely merged with that absolute. So that is that highest level of meditation or Nididhyasanam. Now here, what Krishna is telling Arjuna is that tat shrunu, just by listening. In fact, if my complete senses are on this listening, one doesn't need anything. In fact, in Sandipani Sadhanalayam, I remember our Acharya giving this example of how, when he was studying, his Acharya would tell, about how when he used to teach, that one should not even take any notes down. One should just completely listen to a whole lecture, 100%, and then you go back to your room and try to write down all the points that you have listened to, So that is the art of listening. And Swami Chinmayananda says so beautifully about how when typically for all of us, when we are listening to something, we are actually just listening through our instruments, which are the ears. And because we're just hearing, and that is called as hearing. And when we are just hearing, we are not getting everything in. So we tend to keep writing a lot of notes, because we are afraid that, okay, I've not heard enough and I have to write down these notes. And he would say that, that is also just nothing but hearing. But listening is where completely, entirely, my attention is focused on the speaker. And when I listen to something like this, then I don't need to take any notes, nothing, because it will be in my mind. Now, this sounds very beautiful, but in this day and age, where our mind is so fragmented and disintegrated, with our mind going into so many different places, like even, especially with this kind of online teaching, it is so much more, even more difficult, because on one hand, I may be listening, but on the other hand, maybe my mind would also be thinking of, okay, there's something else that I need to be doing, and a mind can get potentially disintegrated, right? And this is why, again, on one, technology is great. We can do all this, but at the end of the day, there is nothing like how in our Upanishads and everything, it says that, a student has to go to the teacher with, Samit Pani. In Mundakopanishad, there's a very beautiful shloka. It says, the student has totally given up the world. The world doesn't attract him. The world doesn't fascinate him. The world doesn't charm him anymore. And he just goes to the teacher and studies, So that is, of course, the highest form in which we can take this art of listening to. But it's such a beautiful thing about really understanding what listening really means. So that is what Krishna mentions in the very first shloka itself. And then he says, Yatha Jnasasi Tachrunu, which is, if I have listened very carefully, then that knowledge which I get through this listening will totally help me to understand this absolute real nature. So to that level, I'm going to take you to. And he says, Asamshayam Samagram Mam, there is just absolutely without any doubt, and you'll get the truth, nothing but the whole truth, and there's nothing beyond that. So you would have reached the highest form of knowledge. It is the knowledge of all knowledges. So today, I may be a chemist, somebody else may be a biologist, somebody may be an astronomer, all that. Now, all that knowledge is only knowledge of something. But, Krishna says, I'm going to tell you that knowledge because of which all the other knowledge is possible. Now, one may ask, what does that mean? What is this, that knowledge because of this other knowledge is known? So he's trying to show that, I may know chemistry, I may know biology, I may know engineering, all that. But how am I knowing that? What is it because of which I can learn engineering? What is it because of which I can learn all this technology? What is it because of which? So that because of which I can learn is that knowledge is what I'm going to tell you about. So that's why he says this. And mai asakta, which is, again, we said sakta means attachment. Asakta means with absolutely no attachment to your own desires, your own ambitions and all that. So give up all that and mai, come to me, just come to me and I'll take care of you. And madashrayaha, we also talked about, which is the final goal, or this should be an absolute goal. So far, we may have small goals like, okay, I need to get to my next level at work, or I need to, get a different house, or this, all those are small goals, but we need to understand what my final goal is. And it is that goal of understanding that knowledge because of which all the other knowledge is possible. Once when I do that, that is my ashraya, that is my support. And with that support, I can know anything what I want. And then yogam, yunjanmadashraya, yogam, continuously practicing this. This should be my mode of modus operandi, you might say, or something which I should be continuously striving for. So we went to the second shloka, where he then talks about what is it that he's going to say. But in order to say what he's going to say, he also wants to tell us what we think is knowledge. So for that, in the second shloka, we saw last time, Jnanam teham savijnanam idam vakshyam asheshataha yajnatva neha bhuyon yat jnatavyam avashishyate. So he says, I'll tell you what is knowledge and what you think is knowledge. That is what he's trying to say here. What is that absolute knowledge? And that absolute knowledge, he says, is that vijnanam. So jnanam te aham sa vijnanam. He says, I will tell you to you what that scripture, what that means. And along with it, what does it mean with understanding that knowledge, that is vijnanam. Idam, that, vakshyami. Vakshyami, again, this first person he says, right? Vakshyami, I'll tell you, asheshataha, with absolutely no doubt. Nothing else will be left behind. Yat jnatva, yat, very important, yat jnatva, knowing that nothing else need to be known. Jnatavyam avashishyate. So he says this very clearly, that with knowing this is all that you need to really know in life. And again, a very powerful statement here, because we Um, and I think I've explained this before too, after we have studied a certain amount, then the next thing I think about, okay, what else can I study? What else can I study? And, we may take up things, maybe even after retirement, to study things that, I always wanted to study. All that is great because that is all driven by our vasanas. I may have been forced to study, say, for example, engineering or something. And I knew I could have done much better with something else. Like I remember listening to, I don't know how many of you see these videos of Ayo Shraddha. Have you heard of this Ayo Shraddha? She's a pretty famous on the YouTube. You can just type her thing, So once I was listening to an interview, she was saying about how she had gotten into computer science and she got into IT and all that. And then later she discovered that, that is not what she was good at. She was really good in mimicking and giving basically a stage performer. And then she started creating all these simple things, where she would take something like, our Indian marriage, and she would make a little bit of fun about the Indian marriage. Or she would take about, how a worker works in the company, or, how somebody gets a bonus, or the Diwali party at work, something like that, all these things. So, which is great. But all those are still, our own vasanas which are driving it. Now, there is something else much, much beyond all what vasanas are driving at. And that part of it is where he says, we have to strive towards. So, idam vakshami asheshataha, I'll describe this one, knowing that nothing else remains to be known. So, if we have decided that after having studied everything else, finally, I say that, I really want to understand more about Vedanta and what my relation is to the world, what is my relation to the Creator, then I have come to the right place. So nothing else needs to be known. So that part of it, he says here. Then this question may arise, what is really Jnanam and what is Vijnanam? So Jnanam is the knowledge of anything. It's maybe like, I said chemistry or biology or engineering or anything. That is Jnanam. But Vijnanam is how much have I used that knowledge in my life? I mean, simple thing, if in school I study electricity, okay, in 8th standard or 9th standard, slowly students are exposed to more specific branches of, say, physics or anything. And after having studied even basic amount of electricity, now I know what the power of electricity is, that it can, shock somebody and all that. Then when I see a live wire on the ground, I will know exactly how to, I have enough knowledge to know what that live wire can do. That is Vijnanam, where now I have translated that knowledge into an actual use of it. So Jnanam and Vijnanam is how, we need to look at is how am I using that knowledge in my life to make my life a better one. So that is why he says to use scriptural knowledge, I will explain along with what you can do with that knowledge, with that theory of it. So that whole thing, he says, I will explain to you. And like I said, and he says, absolutely without any doubt, I will explain this whole Jnanam and Vijnanam to you. And knowing which, there is nothing else to be known. I'm not going to give you keep any secrets away or anything. So it's not like, as if I hire some people for my company and I teach them everything that they need to know so that they can do the job. But this absolutely the final, secret of it. Like, for example, in a company, you have an R&D scientist, and then you have a product development group, and then you have sales and marketing, right? So many times the scientist will think, okay, I will teach the marketing to launch this product, everything that the product can do. Now, suppose a marketing person goes to, his customer and teaches everything about what the product can do, and the, customer starts using it, but then he ends up into a problem. Now, this marketing person now has to go to the product development and then go to the R&D and try to solve this issue of the product, right? And, but here, so basically some amount of the knowledge which the marketing person needs to know, which he need, this one is not really given to him, or maybe, again, because of different skills, the marketing person may not be able to grasp the whole thing, right? So that's how it is in our knowledge which we use in a regular life. But here Krishna is saying that, knowing that, you'll have absolutely no doubt. I'll tell you everything. I'm not going to leave anything out. You will know the whole thing completely. So that is why he says that. Now, having said this, one would think, that everyone should get this knowledge, right? And I remember way back when in Novi also, when we were there, we would listen to Bhagavad Gita, we would listen to Sharda Aunty tell us about this Bhagavad Gita, and we would think, oh my God, now I'm going to reach out to 10 people and tell them they should come to this study group, and in the beginning, I still remember, we used to put this flyers and put it up, thinking we'll put it in all the Indian stores, because Indian stores, you have so many people, customers coming there, right? So you think that this knowledge is so great, I want to share this with everyone. And I want this whole world to just listen. And I remember one question also that Divakar used to ask long time back in Gita Pradeep's old house, he would say, but, why is it people are just not getting here? Why can't everyone just know it? I don't remember exactly how he would word this question. Maybe I should call him up and ask him about it. But he would say this, people should just get it. Why are they not getting it? But it is not that easy. It is just, think about this, right? Even there are 4 billion people living in this world. How many people are really wanting to learn? Forget about just Gita. Even think about the Quran or think about the Bible. In its essence, how many people are really interested in knowing about it? That is exactly what Krishna anticipates, probably this question already from Arjuna. Arjuna must be thinking in his mind, yeah, Krishna, you're right. This knowledge you're saying, Vijnanam, this wisdom, if I get it, I can really solve any issue, right? It is the knowledge of all knowledge. Don't you think that everyone should just get it? Why is it that people are not getting it? So that is where Krishna then answers the question of Arjuna. So we'll chant this verse. I think we chanted it last time, but I'll just chant this again. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam veti tatvataha. So he says, Manushyanam sahasreshu. So sahasreshu, among thousands of men, So Krishna here doesn't even talk about evolution of species. When we think about evolution of species, there is like, 84 lakhs or 8.4 million beings in this world. He doesn't even talk about that. He just focuses on this 0.001%, 83.999% of people of the species is no problem at all. He's addressing that 0.001 of species, which is Manushya, the man, human being. He says among thousands of human beings, Kaschit, maybe Yatati Siddhe, there may be one person who is actually striving for perfection. So what does that mean, striving for perfection? Maybe one person is really wanting this knowledge. But even among that, he says, Yatatam api siddhanam, even among those people, maybe there is one person who may really get it. So there may be possibly maybe one Buddha or one Jesus, or maybe one, Krishna, no, not Krishna here, sorry, say Bhagwan Adi Shankaracharya, who really is able to totally understand, one Ramana Maharishi. So such people are so rare, and that is why he says, it is totally, absolutely rare among human beings. Now, why is it? And this is why last time I promised you I'll put this chart up, about this distinction about people. So when we look at the whole world, right? When we look at the world, what does the world really have? The world has stones, right? And it has plants or trees, and that whole flora and fauna, like we say. And then we have this whole world of animals and birds and everything. And then we have the humans. Now, I've brought this up, as a kind of a transition in the gradation of how evolution happened. And maybe there is, even among human beings, we don't stop there. Like Darwin probably stopped at this point. He explained about all this as an evolution, but he doesn't actually go into even plant or stones as any beings at all, right? He actually starts with the animals and birds, and then finally says, human, he stops there. But we actually consider this entire picture, the whole big picture, when we think about this whole aspect of evolution, right? So this is something, and then ultimately we have somebody like Shankaracharya or Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, all of them as great Mahatmas. Now, why is this very important? Because we can even look in this evolution from, a human being itself, a human being, like, again, in Kindle Life, the very first book on Vedanta, Vedanta Concepts with Swami Chinmayananda's book, if you remember, in that he explains about, stone men. People maybe have a human anatomical structure, but they could be a stone person, which is, they are only within themselves. They are just, even to get up and do something, it's very difficult. So such people are stone men who are so much only, like I said, into themselves, doing things only what is good for them. Such people are called as, he would say, are stone men. Now, the next evolution is plant, where at least, the plants, you have creepers and then you have trees. So the creepers and the tree, they have a kind of a symbiotic relationship, each one supporting and nurturing each other in its growth and everything, right? So such people would be plant, and same thing in a human world, we would have such people who are, well, at least, helping out a little bit each other. So long as it is beneficial for me, I'll help somebody else, so something like that. So he would say, this is kind of a plant human being, plant men. And, or it's better to say plant human being here. And then we have, animal men, animal human beings. Who are those animal human beings? Well, animal human beings are those who have their desires. They are going out hunting for their desires to satisfy their cravings and everything which is there in the world. Finally, from there, you have at least some people who are really humans, who have humane qualities of compassion and love and everything for, their own fellow beings. And from there, it doesn't stop at that point, but you have, from those people who have those humane qualities, finally you have maybe one person who is, so evolved. And that is where we have this great Mahatmas. So I just wanted to explain this in one slide in the form of, this evolution of being. And that is why we have in the shloka where he talks about that Manushyanam Sahasra, among thousands of people, we have maybe one, and even among that, we have somebody who is so rare, that, and that is why we are talking about Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya here, who lived only for 32 years. And even in this 32 years, the amount that he had achieved, in literally about, I would say, there's a shloka, I wish I had memorized the shloka, but it says, in the first line of the shloka, that how within 8 years of his life, he had actually mastered the Vedas, and within 12 years, Dwadasha, in 12 years, he had mastered the entire knowledge of all the Puranas, everything, whatever has to be learned about knowledge, he had already mastered. And then in 16 years, he had already done so much. He had traveled throughout the entire length and breadth of India, at least twice. And by the age of 32, he has already accomplished everything. He had left the world. Such great masters in just such a short time had made such a great impact. And because of which even today, the world is what it is, where, he had taught about no divisions of people and how, the upliftment of women. He had talked about the great, so many different shlokas, Saundarya Lahari and everything, which talked about the beauty of, about Devi. So there is so much that he had done, and that is why this shloka is so very apt that we are doing it today, because yesterday, 2 days ago was Shankara Jayanti here on 25th. Today is 27th for me, but 26th for you. So, yeah. So anyway, that is what I wanted to explain here. The rest of it will come later when we discuss more about the existence and consciousness part of it. But this I had made it before. So any questions or thoughts on this evolution and how does it relate to, what we experience? Does somebody want to share anything here? So later in the same chapter, we'll come across another beautiful shloka, which is Bahunam Janmanam Ante Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate. It's only after many, many births and deaths that one Bahunam Janmanam Ante, Bahunam, many births and deaths. He who is actually in knowledge surrenders to me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. So it takes many, many lives and it takes time. And, I may say that, I'm doing so much amount of japa, I'm doing so much amount of studies and everything. But, I see that my progress is not there. Actually, which is not true. The progress is very much there. But considering the amount of lives that I have lived, where I have solidified so many amount of my desires and everything, to give all that up and to move ahead is so difficult. And it's just a simple example. If you think about it, in all this life of 60 years that we have lived, we have eaten so much food and everything. Do everything really stick to us? If it really everything stuck to us, imagine how fat we would have been, right? But only whatever is needed sticks to our body, and we kind of grow in size or whatever, right? So think about that with the knowledge too. How much are we reading and how much are we listening? How much of the essence of these things are we really taking into our lives and really practicing that? So that is why it takes janmas, and this is the only way we can explain how of evolution, of reincarnation and everything, because we see that effect in our own lives. In the 60 years that we have lived, how much have we evolved? How much we could have done better? We all know that we shouldn't be too caught up with this world. But guess what? Even after this lecture is over, immediately everything about the world just comes into my mind and I get caught up in it again, right? So that's what Bhagavad Gita is trying to show, that, human birth is really, really rare. It is not, it's not an accident that we have just got this human birth. We have actually done a lot of punyam in our previous birth to have this human birth, and we have to use it for the right purpose, and which is truly to start reflecting upon that higher knowledge. And these are just simple things that I read, and I said, okay, we need to put this, to think about, I'm doing so much amount of work. What is that work that I'm doing? With this work, is it possible for me to get to the state of knowledge? How can I really work in such a way that I can, what is it that is leading to punya? And what is it that is leading to papa? What are the aspects of all the things that I'm doing which takes me into different in these areas? How can I really know what is the lower? This is in Mundaka Upanishad in shloka number 2 or 3. He talks about this apara vidya and paravidya. Apara vidya, is all these, all this knowledge. There are 6 different things he talks about. And for us, this apara vidya could be anything that we're dealing with, all this technology, everything that, Elon Musk and this chat GPT and all these things that's happening, all that is all apara vidya. Para vidya is that higher knowledge. So in the beginning, because of our vasanas, we might get into all this other vidyas, but later I need to find a way in how I can graduate to the higher knowledge. I also need to, only in this human birth, all this is possible. Only in a human birth can I really understand what my vasanas are. What is it that is driving me? How can I really free myself from these vasanas and then finally become liberated? Liberated, understanding that I am beyond these vasanas. How can I look at myself objectively? How can I introspect and find this purpose of life? As an animal, it is impossible because animals don't have that intellect to think about it. So even in us, we can understand what the mind is. Mind is the equipment. It's that subtle equipment, which in Chandogya Upanishad beautifully, it talks about how it's the subtle aspect of all these tanmatras, which becomes this mind. And this mind can only help us do our things. It is very emotional in nature. It can respond to those things. But then we have this intellect, which is guiding us. But even among this intellect, the lower part of the intellect is guiding the mind, but there is this higher aspect of the intellect which can lead me to understand that higher knowledge. So how can I look at myself in that way and introspect and find this purpose of life with this intellect? How can I even visualize this possibility of evolution and think about this greater goal in life? And how can I really use all this? So all this is possible only in a human birth. So that is why the shloka, when I don't know, maybe this is the only shloka which talks about this manushya aspect, manushyanam sahasreshu. So in a human birth is the only place where we have that freedom to do all these things. And that is why, this human body that we have been given is so precious. We have to take care of this equipment so that it can allow us to get to ask these questions for ourselves. So this one is, and so we have to be striving towards perfection continuously. And that is why, in the previous shloka, he talks about yogam yunjanma adashrayaha. So striving for perfection, because out of millions, there's very, very few people who can actually get to it. And even among those who are striving, like I mentioned in the beginning of our session, people who are actually seeking, many of us are still searching. sometimes we we may like a certain style in which certain thing the knowledge is said, and sometimes we may not be happy about it. So we are always searching and searching for maybe sometimes the style in which I can listen to the knowledge, but we're not seeking for that knowledge itself. So striving for perfection, basically striving for that knowledge, and finally, even among those who are the people who have actually attained that. So all this is possible only in a human birth. So this actually brings to a completion of one set of thought here, where Krishna is preparing Arjuna for really now understanding this whole world. So you see, I mean, the question that Arjuna had asked in the at the end of the last chapter was, how can I, who I am this finite self, finite, when I explained this before, finite in terms of this much amount of weight and all this thing which defines me, how can I, this finite, know you as the infinite, right? So Krishna is again taking him through step by step this process. Before explaining to him that infinite part of it, he now wants to explain to him about how that infinite is taken the forms of what this whole world is all about. So you will see in the next 3 shlokas, he gives really about this model of what this nature is. And here we will see how the various concepts from, maybe the Sankhya philosophy, and you will see also some aspects of Bhagavatam we will be looking into. How, whether it is like in Sankhya philosophy, they talk about 24 components which makes this nature. And in Bhagavatam also that similar thing is mentioned about, how this 5 gross elements, this 19 subtle elements, and we'll go into it quite a bit of detail here. So all these things, we will actually see this, but we'll at least chant the next 2 shlokas and we'll see the basics of it, and we'll take it up further next week. Bhumirapo nalo vayuhu, Bhumirapo nalo vayuhu, Tham mano buddhirevacha, Tham mano buddhirevacha, Ahankara iti yam me, Ahankara iti yam me, Bhinna prakriti rashthada, Bhinna prakriti rashthada. So he says, coming to this forms of himself, right? This is the saguna aspects. What are all of them? So he says bhumihi, which is earth, apaha, water, analaha. We have learned many of these words in a Sanskrit when we studied Sanskrit, right? Analaha. Then vayuhu, air, kham or ether, manaha, mind, buddhihi, intellect, evacha. So all these, along with ahankara, that is, who I think, ahankaraha, iti, iyam. All these is how the nature, this nature is divided into this 8-fold. So he talks about this 8 things here. And then I'll chant the next one also. Next week, like I said, we'll go a little more into details about how they're all related. So he says, all this is actually my lower nature. We saw this, how he looks upon himself as the para and apara. So apara vidya. So apareyamitis dvanyam, apareyamitis dvanyam, prakritim vidhi me param, prakritim vidhi me param, jiva bhutam mahabaho, jiva bhutam mahabaho, yayedam dharyate jagat, yayedam dharyate jagat. So he says, all this is my lower form, apara. Apara, iyam, itaha, tu, anyam. All these are part of my lower nature. But that is different from Prakritim Vidhi Me Param. From that, you know then how different it is from my higher nature. And Jiva Bhutam, this is the principle Bhutam Mahabahu. That higher nature is the principle of life in all these beings. Yaye idam dharyate jagat, and by which this world is upheld. So that higher nature is because of which this whole lower nature of mine is all there, is all held together. So this combination of me is who I am, which is the lower nature and the higher nature. So I'm going to tell you about both of them. Only then you will understand in total what my true nature is. So we will stop with that here and we'll meet again next week. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.